everyone? Jason Gilbo here at JGilbo11, taking a look at the Daily Fantasy Cafe FanDuel optimal lineup and stack for Week 11. Quick review of last week, pretty solid week. Obviously, we saw Big Ben and Le'Veon Bell carry a lot of the load. David Johnson with the 2 touchdowns, those are kind of the obvious calls. But the value wideouts that we came up with, I mean, obviously Larry Johnson, not Larry Johnson, going back in time there, Larry Fitzgerald, in the same lineup as those stacks with David Johnson and the Pittsburgh stack was very solid. But also, I mean, Kendall Wright was a nice call. Obviously, very cheap, got the touchdown. Jordan Matthews had a decent week, didn't find the end zone, but racked up catches and yards, and Tyrell Williams broke out. The only real area that the optimizer whiffed on was Lance Kendricks as the value tight end spot, which basically was a punt. So that was pretty the only loss. Looking at this week here, pretty hard not to be on some of these guys. Obviously, it's Thursday, 2 o'clock Eastern time, so we're still, waiting on injury situations, but it looks like for the most part, some of these guys are going to be playing regardless. Looking at the cash game lineup, which is the first one here, the cash projection, we see Andrew Luck, who I'm liking quite a bit. In the GPP, we see Marcus Mariota. I'm basically fine with either one in cash and GPPs this week. Obviously, the higher projection for GPP goes to Mariota, so it looks like he's going to carry just a smaller value than Luck, even at a similar price. Obviously, both the way those past defenses have been playing this year, you can fire away on both sides. Game total, in the 50s, small 3.5 point spread for the Colts. So you're expecting a lot of production from that offense, really on both sides. So I do like that quite a bit. And as far as the running backs go, I mean, they're not going to be low owned in this GPP lineup. And obviously cash, this is probably your most ideal pairing, is Blount and Bell. And obviously, look at those two defenses. San Francisco and Cleveland are two of the worst defenses in the league against the run. And you can certainly fire away, especially with Blount's price tag. I mean, that's ridiculous. It's 7,300. He really should be nearing 8K, in that type of matchup. So, definitely like that. I like the grouping there in the GPP. Obviously, I think that's a safe option. Really, in all formats, I think the upside is there. So, if you're looking for a contrarian swerve, the optimizer is not really suggesting to use that swerve at running back. We see a little bit more in the wide receivers. Things kind of change a little bit. Antonio Brown in the cash game lineup, Doug Baldwin, Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill for me is a GPP play this week. I can't quite use him in cash games. For me, in my personal preference, I think I would come down off of Brown and kind of spread out that cash a little bit between the other two wideouts. I like Doug Baldwin's price tag this week, 6,700. We could be in the midst of seeing, like last year, where Baldwin and Wilson were just unstoppable for about 5-6 weeks. A really nice price tag against a defense that really has only played really well at home this year. And if Russell Wilson's healthy, obviously that upgrades Doug Baldwin, 6,700. I like that. In terms of being my first or second or even third cash game play at wide receiver 2, I like Dante Moncrief a little bit more. I think he's got a safer floor than Baldwin does. Baldwin may have a little bit higher upside, I think, in terms of a multi-touchdown type of thing, but I think he's fairly decent. Hill obviously saw 10 targets with Jeremy Maclin out last week. Hill's been kind of a boomer bust play even when Maclin's been healthy. Obviously a good matchup against Tampa secondary that's, fairly mediocre. We're seeing basically, a big drop off after Brown in terms of pricing. So paying up with an expensive back and not really a cheap quarterback, you're going to see kind of a dive down value here at wideout. I'm okay with it. I think it's a little bit risky. I think I would kind of make some swaps there. I do like using Moncrief. In terms of using Tyreek Hill, that's where I think I'd be using the Brown money that I dropped down to someone else to kind of bump him up a little bit. To like a Jamison Crowder or a Randall Cobb. I like that move a little bit more. So, Rob Gronkowski looking like he's going to miss this week. I don't see a real need for him to play. I don't think New England does either against San Francisco. Obviously, Martellus Bennett would be a very chalky cash and GPP tight end, which he pops up in all 3 lineups here. Obviously, a good matchup against San Francisco. You look at that total, 32.5, I believe it is right now. So Martellus Bennett in a solid spot. Obviously, he doesn't block as much when Gronk is out, so obviously that's something that's going to benefit him. Dustin Hopkins and Adam Vinatieri here, both the two kickers it chooses, so looking to pay up a little bit. Both are listed in Denny Carter's kicker article. I highly recommend that you go and check that out. So you know what? If he says it's okay, I'm going to believe him. Obviously, the optimizer says it's okay. I'm using those kickers. And then we get into defense here. Obviously, a $500, $700 difference from the Chiefs in Seattle with Minnesota. Obviously, Minnesota was one of the better defenses coming into about week 6, week 7 before they started trending downwards. I actually like them here in a GPP format. I'm not quite on them in cash games. I'd rather use the Chiefs. I'd rather use Seattle. But given the value, I'm okay with it because Carson Palmer has not been good. Cardinals on the road, turning the ball over 2 times per game. David Johnson hasn't really been the greatest in terms of a yard per carry standpoint over the last few weeks. And obviously Minnesota at home. So I think it's actually a decent move if that really helps you bump up another tier guy. If that case, I still rather use the Chiefs. I still rather use Seattle. In the optimal GPP lineup, we see a lot of the same plays, but obviously AJ Green and Mike Evans and then a Kendall Wright. So it's looking to dive down even further from a Tyreek Hill. The Kendall Wright pairing with Mariota is an interesting GPP play. And then using AJ Green and Mike Evans. Obviously, I don't think Mike Evans is going to be a little bit lower owned. We saw last week really a big dud against Chicago. And then you look at AJ Green. I mean, Buffalo's 32nd against wide receiver ones, a horrible DVOA. And then Mike Evans, I mean, is a mismatch for anyone. So obviously those are 2 really high-priced wide receivers, yet with enormous upside. So I definitely like that move in GPPs. I like the pairing still with Mariota, Blunt, and Bell, Martellus Bennett. So you do have a good mix of chalk. You do have Evans and Wright, who are GPP plays. Should get lower ownership. So it's a good mix and match. In terms of the optimal GPP stack, it's just a combination here. We're looking at Tennessee, Marcus Mariota, Kendall Wright, Delaney Walker. Obviously, we saw that stack pay off last week. It certainly could again this week. For me, I like a correlation play with my stacks. So if I'm using a Titans or a Titans stack, I like using a Hilton. I like using a Moncrief on the other side. I like getting the game stack in there in the correlation because generally it hits most of the time. So I think this is a good combination of the previous 2 lineups, obviously tossing in a higher priced tight end, pivot off of Bennett, who's going to be chalky. Walker probably is going to be the more chalkier, expensive option with some Jordan Reed mixed in. So overall, 24 team total, and the fact that it's not the highest team total on the board, but you're still getting exposure to 2 of the highest ones with Bell, with Blunt. The Seattle Seahawks one is relatively nice. So I think you can target away and kind of mix and match there. And overall, this is a fairly safe stacking lineup. I think this is even cash game playable, regardless of just kind of saying that it's GPP. Usually we look to, always stacking GPPs, but looking fairly safe. So that's going to wrap things up with the Week 11 FanDuel Optimal Lineups and Stack. Be sure to head on over to DailyFantasyCafe.com, check out the great tools and content. As always, this is Thursday, so things may be a little bit different if you're rolling the optimal lineup and just seeing what it comes up with come Saturday morning, come Saturday night, Sunday evening. As always, our stuff is always updating as far as projections go. So see you guys in Week 12.